All right, we're talking the Pete Alonso deal that came down last night, and one of our go-to guys. He's so great and so generous with his time when it comes to us, and that's Andy Martino of SNY. He joins us now. Andy, how you doing?
I'm good, Michael. How are you? I'm glad I finally got my off season, and oh wait, I'm flying to Florida on Monday.
Oh wow! Well, at least you get
That's
some
how it
hopefully
goes
good
nowadays
weather.
in this business. That's right.
Yeah,
You're right. You know what? There are worse things.
Absolutely. All right, so I think I texted you this last night. Talk to me like I'm a child. I thought the Mets valued this guy at about $23 million a year, and he ends up with 30. And I know the benefit is a one-year deal, but they're paying. He's the highest-paid first baseman in baseball, and he's not nearly the best.
Yeah, well, fair question. You got me thinking about that too. So having followed all the twists and turns of this, first of all, on how they valued him, it's a little bit misleading. This oft-repeated offer that he had turned down that was supposedly 68 to 70 million, because which was a couple of weeks ago. Because in addition to that money, there was significant deferred money. So Alonso and Scott Boras could have claimed a higher number than 70 if they'd taken that deal. Mm-hmm. So that doesn't completely address your question, but that's one piece of context. And in terms of like the thought of the Mets capitulating on the price, I think the Mets would probably agree with you on that they never wanted to go to 30 million on any given year. And that was a hard compromise for them to make, especially after they legitimately pivoted away from Alonso a few weeks ago and spent his dollars on Jesse Winker, AJ Minter, Ryan Stanek. They basically did a mini version of what the Yankees did after losing Soto, just spreading the money around.
Right.
So the payroll is now way higher than they wanted it to be. And on the other side of things, though, Michael, Alonso's side could be said to have significantly capitulated on years and total dollars of the kind of free agent they initially thought he was going to be value-wise. So significant concessions on one side on dollars and the other side on years, I would say.
I look at it this way, and I wonder if you agree with me. I think that what happened at the amazing day at Citi Field with the fans so strong in their support of Alonso and making Steve Cohen here, I think the fans pushed this over the finish line. Do you agree or not?
It's complex. I mean, I know that Cohen obviously cares about the fans, his customers being happy. And it's tough to get inside a guy's heart and soul to say how much that would have affected. But I will say it didn't affect them to the extent of lengthening their offer, improving their offer just to get something done. I mean, what also didn't change, Michael, was that the baseball people, David Stearns and his group, were always on Alonso as their first baseman for 2025. They just weren't on him for like a long-term deal. So the baseball people never changed their mind. We want Pete. They were telling their owner, but we'll walk away if it has to be more than a couple of years. That was always their stance, remained their stance. And I still believe that if Alonso hadn't been willing to accept a 2-year deal, or that he was also floated a 3-year deal the other day, if he weren't willing to do it this way, the Mets were going to walk away no matter what happened at the amazing day. Is Steve Cohen, the human being, take in that fan reaction and weigh it? Is what does Aaron Boone like to say? Baked into the cake or an ingredient in the stew or something like that? Sure, something like that, but I don't think it was pivotal.
Was there another offer for him out there, or did he have to accept this? Because, a 1-year deal for a guy who had bigger dreams and aspirations. Yeah. Was there anything out there with the Blue Jays or the Reds or the Angels?
Well, the Blue Jays was the most serious. They got really serious. The timeline's tough to remember now. Sometime in mid to late January, myself and a few others were reporting that they were advancing in talks with the Blue Jays, and that obviously didn't get consummated. Whether that was like dead, or could have been revived yesterday if Alonso had wanted it to, I couldn't tell you like how hard the Alonso camp's no was to Toronto, but they were getting there a while back. It didn't work out. There was talk yesterday in the negotiation of Alonso having another $30 million offer out there from another team. But I'll just say I can't independently verify that, and I don't know anyone else who can.
All right. So, I mean, one thing that Met fans have to rejoice about, Steve Cohen really doesn't care about money, because not only does he give Alonso $30 million, but that pushes him over the Cohen tax. So he's at 327, 328. So that means 27 of that is taxed at 110 million. So he's essentially paying about $57 million for this contract.
Yeah, and they actually calculate that number as higher, Michael, internally, because I believe that's the publicly available number, and it's close. But when teams look at it, they look at budgeted money for IL stuff and payroll stuff through the year, which is, I don't know, 5-10. Do you want to hold and reserve another 10 to 15 for the trade deadline in season additions? So they perceive their own payroll right now as like 330s, 340s, and they're not happy about that. That wasn't the idea. Stearns never had a hard budget, but they don't want to be paying that 110% tax, which definitely influences roster choices. Ryan Stanek at $4.5 million versus Kenley Jansen at 10 or 12. The choice they made was Stanek, because Jansen's 10 or 12 is what? I wasn't a math major, but like mid to high 20s, right? For Kenley Jansen. So these are all the things you're facing. They want to be under this number more often than they're over it. That highest Cohen tax threshold. But every year something seems to come up where they see a chance of what they see as improving their club. And you're right. Mets fans have to love that Cohen's it's a soft line, but it's obviously not a hard line. And signing Alonso now, if Alonso opts in for 26, it's going to be really hard to get down close to that number, for another season. So they don't love that, but credit to them, because again, baseball ops is telling the owner we're a better team with Alonso. So it's like, okay, fine, spend the money. That's kind of how it felt.
Andy Martino of SNY is our guest. Now, I was talking about this in the open of the show, Andy. So you're telling me let's go for 330 because that's a nice round number. So the payroll's 330. Mm-hmm. So the latest Fangraphs playoff odds for 330 payroll, the second highest payroll in the game to the Dodgers. Mm-hmm. The Mets are at 57.5% to make the playoffs. The Dodgers are at 98.2%. So you can make the argument, Andy, that's not 330 well spent if your odds are only 57.5% to make the playoffs.
Well, when you think of it like that, sure. I always kind of roll my eyes at those Fangraph odds, because I remember covering the Mets playoff chase last year, and like one day they had no shot because it's 9% or whatever. And then they win 3 games and it's 81%. You know how that is? And like, I hate it when people ask me who's going to win the NL East or the AL East, that stuff, because it's always like, well, I don't know. Who's going to get hurt? Who's going to stay healthy? Who's going to what's the trade deadline going to look like? Who's going to have the magic and the vibes this year? So I guess I kind of shrug off odds and predictions. I take your point that they're not the Dodgers, like on paper or even in reality, and they're spending a lot of money. But I guess I'm always like, let's see how the season plays out with all that stuff.
Well, I agree with you, but I do look at it this way. Forget about Fangraphs odds, okay? Their starting staff is pedestrian. Their bullpen is kind of pedestrian. So, I mean, there are a lot of question marks on the team with the second highest paid payroll in the game. And you
no
said it was almost a miscalculation by them, Andy, because they thought that Alonso was gone and they spent Alonso's money, and then Alonso comes back at this huge number. I don't know. That doesn't seem like it was their plan.
No. Their plan, once Alonso turned them down a couple of weeks ago, and there was, I think I called it a pivot the day I reported it. That you're right. The plan was then to start spending on the Jesse Winkers and the Minters and whatever, and did not slam the door on Alonso. But it was not ideal money-wise to have it play out this way. But of course, you could argue it was more ideal roster-wise because now they have all these players, right? Winker's a nice addition. Obviously, Minter's a guy they need in their bullpen. I agree with you, Michael. They have what the Mets bullpen has going for them is some internal depth and some interesting arms. But really what they have going for them is David Stearns' reputation from Milwaukee of finding good pitchers and like unheralded guys that step up, because I'm not seeing it on paper either with the pitching staff. I think it's hard to see it as a strength of the team. So you go, well, I guess they know what they're doing. They hit on a bunch of guys last year. Stearns did it in Milwaukee. So that's where I'm at with it too. And right now, slotting Alonso into that lineup, obviously it's a formidable offense, especially the first 4 or 5 guys. And they don't on paper have the pitching staff to match that offense in quality. I completely agree with that. So, that's going to be the question mark for them for sure. It's a championship level lineup, you could argue, and doesn't look like a pitching staff to match it. But I guess they know what they're doing. We'll see.
That's the way to bet. That's the way to bet. And I do also wonder, though, Andy, if Pete doesn't hit that home run against Devin Williams, if there was going to be such an outcry to bring him back. I mean, I think Met fans fell back in love after he had a miserable season.
It was an expensive home run. It was a wonderful moment. Yeah, no, I agree because I felt, and it's hard as a reporter on the inside kind of to have a pulse on the fan base maybe completely. We're like in a kind of running in different circles. But what I felt like from the press box view and what you hear from people generally was that Mets fans are kind of down on Alonso, like you said, the year that he had, just some stuff adding up, making the All-Star team over his more deserving teammates because of the home run derby and things like that. It was like, all right, Pete. And then in that game in Milwaukee, remember he tripped over his bat earlier in the game, and I was like, oh, geez, this is ending, ugly for Pete, which is too bad. Pete's got a good heart. It's too bad. But if he made an out in that inning rather than hit the home run against Devin Williams, I agree with you. It's totally different dynamic with the fan pressure. And you could say, I guess it wouldn't influence David Stearns' recommendation that they're a slightly better team with him because that's all based on models and stuff, but certainly sentiment would have been different.
I'll tell you what, final thing, Andy. I've had some interaction with Pete. He's always really a pleasant dude. You've had more interaction with him. So knowing him better than I do you think he comes into the season ticked off because that long-term mega money deal wasn't there, or is he just going to be Pete?
Fascinated by that question, Michael, and so were the Mets. I have been around him since he was a kid. He's a nice person. I agree with you. Very prideful, as he should be, as these guys all need to be. I think the 30 number helps. And if you're Steve Cohen and you have that money, maybe that last couple of millions in investment in Pete's morale, right?
Right.
You can hold your head high about the AAV at least. And so that's their hope. He's an emotional guy and takes a lot of pride in what he does and thinks of himself as a big, big star in the game. And he is a star. So I think I'm going to be really interested to see the choreography of this whole thing. Is there going to be a press conference? Is it late enough where he's just going to talk at spring training and just try to get this over with once and then just carry on as usual? I don't know. That's like, can't wait to get a look at him and see how he seems. I think you're asking the key question.
Well, safe travels down to Florida. Thank you for always helping us out, and we'll talk to you soon, Andy.
Thanks, Michael. Anytime.
All right. That's Andy Martino of SNY.